Summer in Cluj-Napoca smelled like wildflowers and ancient stone. Charlie Novak photographed everything. The cobblestone streets, the orange rooftops, the vineyards spilling down the Transylvanian hillsides like poured paint. 35 years old, award-winning architect, with an apartment on the Upper West Side and a fiancée who was literally the smartest woman he had ever met. Rachel Voss, cardiologist, amber eyes, laughing before she finished her own jokes. 12 days until the wedding. "I didn't need more vacation," he had said when she proposed the trip. "I needed you." She had thrown a sock at him and said she needed both. The group was 7 people. Rachel and Charlie, college friend Marcus and his wife Dana, freelance photographer Theo, who had pushed hardest for Romania as a destination, and a Canadian couple they had met at the hostel in Cluj, Carl and Margot, who asked too many questions and took too few pictures. The hike through Hoiabaciu Forest began at 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. The local guide, a man in his 50s named Andre, had said only one thing before they entered the forest. "Stay together. Don't answer if you hear your name being called by someone you can't see. And if your watch stops, turn back immediately." Everyone laughed. Except Andre. The forest was genuinely unsettling. Not in a Hollywood way with artificial fog and violin strings, but in a geological, almost surgical way. The trees grew in impossible spirals. Their trunks twisted as though something beneath the earth was pulling them in opposing directions. The silence was dense, organic, the kind of silence that weighs. No birds, no insects, only the sound of their own footsteps and their own breathing. Charlie was at the back of the group, photographing the angle of an oak tree that grew perfectly horizontal for nearly 10 feet before curving abruptly toward the sky. He stood still for maybe 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. When he looked up, the group had disappeared around the bend in the path. He wasn't worried. He walked faster. He called out, "Silence." He called louder, "Silence," and then, in the distance, something that vaguely sounded like his own name, but at a strange frequency, like a recording played slightly too slow. He remembered what Andre had said. He walked faster still. The forest looked exactly the same in every direction. Marcus was the first to notice. He stopped in the middle of a sentence, looked back and counted the people with his finger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rachel turned around immediately. "Charlie." It wasn't a question. It was a diagnosis. They retraced the path for 20 minutes calling his name. Andre went visibly pale. Not with the performed fright of a tour guide used to making the experience seem scary, but with a real pallor, the kind that belongs to someone who recognizes a pattern they had hoped never to see again. The Cluj-Napoca police arrived at nightfall. Tracking dogs were deployed. The dogs entered the forest, stopped at roughly 600 feet from the edge, and refused to go further. One of them howled in a way that the officer said, afterward, he had never heard before. Not like barking, not like whining, but something between the two that he preferred not to describe in more detail. 3 days of searches. Nothing. No trace. No footprints beyond the point where the photos on Charlie's phone ended. The last photo showed the horizontal oak with its impossible curve toward the sky. The metadata indicated 2:47 p.m. The group had noticed his absence at 2:49 p.m. 2 minutes. Charlie Novak had disappeared in 2 minutes. Rachel didn't fly back to New York the following week as planned. She stayed in Cluj for 3 more weeks, sleeping in a hotel 15 minutes from the forest, going to the edge of the woods every morning and standing at the entrance like someone waiting for a bus she knew might never come. The Upper West Side apartment was full of wedding flower samples. The date was September 14th. There were 11 days left when she finally boarded the flight back to New York, carrying Charlie's suitcase, Charlie's passport, and the engagement ring she had taken off her finger and stored in her coat pocket because she could no longer look at it. The date arrived with a quiet cruelty, as dates do. September 14th, a Friday. The venue in Brooklyn was booked. The invitations had already been sent. Most of the 200 guests had heard about the disappearance and expected no celebration. But Rachel woke at 6 in the morning, went to the window overlooking the Hudson, and stood there for an hour. She didn't officially cancel the wedding. She simply didn't go. Nobody blamed her. Marcus showed up with a bottle of wine and stayed with her until midnight, without saying much. Dana sent flowers. Theo, the photographer who had chosen Romania, sent a message that started with, "I'm so sorry," and after 3 paragraphs of apologies she stopped reading. The apartment smelled like Charlie in a way that was gradually fading, and that was, somehow, worse than anything else. In the 4 months that followed, Rachel Voss functioned the only way she knew how, with clinical precision. She returned to work at Mount Sinai 2 weeks after the wedding that didn't happen. She operated. She diagnosed. She supervised residents. She attended every commitment that was expected of her and none of the ones that were optional. She slept 5 hours a night and woke every morning at 4:23 a.m. for no apparent reason, with the feeling that she had heard something. She hired a private investigator in Cluj-Napoca, a former police officer named Bogdan, who sent bi-weekly reports with new theories and no evidence: organized crime, dissociative amnesia, voluntary disappearance. This last one Rachel deleted from her inbox without finishing. She knew Charlie in a way that made that theory impossible. Not impossible like unlikely, impossible like 2 + 2 = 5. She had studied the human heart in its most literal and metaphorical form, and Charlie Novak's heart was not the heart of someone who runs away. It was a Tuesday morning in January, 11:32 a.m., when Rachel's phone buzzed with an international number she didn't recognize. She was between appointments. She answered on reflex. "Ms. Voss." The voice was male with a thick Romanian accent. "This is Sergeant Danila, from the Floresti Police Department. Please call me back when you can. We have information regarding Charles Novak." Rachel was in the hospital hallway. She wouldn't be able to say afterward how she got to the break room. She was simply there, sitting down, the phone against her ear, her heart, which she understood better than most people on the planet, beating in a way she would later describe as disorganized. She called back in 40 seconds. Charlie had been found that Tuesday morning by a farmer on the outskirts of Floresti, a municipality west of Cluj-Napoca. He was walking along a rural road with no shoes, wearing the same clothes from the hike, the moss green jacket, the gray cargo pants, in perfect physical condition except for roughly a week's worth of beard and an expression the farmer described as the look of someone who just woke from a very long dream and still isn't sure what's real. He knew his name. He knew Rachel's name. He knew he lived in New York. He didn't know that 7 months had passed. To him, it had been one afternoon. Rachel flew to Cluj the next morning with a change of clothes for Charlie and 12 questions she had written in a notebook during the flight. A cardiologist by training, but she thought like an investigator when she needed to. The hospital in Floresti was small, clean, with corridors that smelled of disinfectant and noisy radiators. A doctor named Dr. Moga received her with a firm handshake and the expression of someone who had seen things he preferred not to discuss in detail. "Physically, he's fine," said Dr. Moga. "Remarkably fine, actually. No hipotermia, no malnutrition, no desidration." As if time simply hadn't passed for him. "And mentally?" The doctor paused 2 seconds longer than a normal pause. "He has no memory of the period. None at all. But there's something you should probably know before you go in." He crossed his arms. "He's been asking about the forest. Not with fear, with urgency. As if he needs to go back. Our team is trying to determine whether it's a dissociative state, but..." He stopped again. "But..." But he described, in precise detail, the interior of a room none of us recognize. A circular room, no windows, with walls he describes as made of something between stone and light. We thought it was confabulation, the brain filling gaps with imagery. Except that. He opened a folder and showed Rachel a sheet of paper. It was a drawing Charlie had made during the night. Precise architectural lines. He was an architect, after all. His hands knew how to do this even when his mind didn't know what it was drawing. Rachel looked at the drawing. It was a floor plan. A circular structure, perfectly symmetrical, with 7 chambers around a center, connected by corridors radiating outward like petals. 7 chambers. She felt something slip inside her chest. When did he make this? At 4:23 in the morning. The room was small. Charlie was sitting on the bed, looking out the window at the snow-covered fields. He turned his head when she came in, and what she saw on his face was not exactly what she had expected. Not relief, not happiness. It was recognition, as if he were identifying her, cataloging her, placing her in the right spot on a mental map. "Rachel," he said. She crossed the room and hugged him, and he hugged her back. But there was something in the mechanics of the embrace that was slightly off, like when you use your dominant hand to do something you normally do with the other. "How are you?" she asked against his shoulder. "Confused," he said. "But fine. I'm fine." She pulled back and looked at him. Same brown eyes. Same lopsided smile. The beard was a little long but suited his face in a way that was aesthetically his. "What do you remember?" "The forest. The horizontal oak." He frowned. "And then here. The road. The cold. Nothing in between?" He hesitated. And in that hesitation, a fraction of a second, nearly imperceptible Rachel Voss, who had spent 15 years learning to read the involuntary rhythms of the human body, saw something. It wasn't that he didn't know. It was that he was deciding what to say. They returned to New York 10 days later, when the doctors cleared Charlie with a diagnosis of dissociative amnesia of undetermined origin and a recommendation for psychological follow-up. The Upper West Side apartment was exactly as Charlie had left it. The architecture books stacked on the left side of the bed. The mug on the second shelf of the cabinet because he was too tall to comfortably use the first. The charger coiled in that specific, unnatural way that only he coiled it. Charlie walked through the apartment with his hands slightly open, touching the surfaces. Rachel watched him from the entrance. "Does it feel like what you remember?" "Yes," he said. "Exactly." They went to bed and Rachel woke at 4:23 a.m. Charlie's side of the bed was empty. She found him in the living room, sitting at the drafting table, working with pencil and ruler in the lamplight. She stood in the doorway for a moment before he noticed she was there. "Can't sleep," he said. She looked at the paper on the table. It was the same floor plan, the circular structure, the 7 chambers, except now there were more details. He had added proportions, measurements, technical notations, as if he were designing a real building. "Charlie," she said slowly, "you're drawing this from memory." He looked at the paper as if he had forgotten what he was doing. "I am," he said. "From a memory you said you don't have." Long pause. "Rachel." "No." She entered the room and stood on the other side of the table, looking at him. "Don't tell me you're confused. Don't tell me you don't know. I saw you hesitate at the hospital when I asked what you remembered. I'm a doctor, Charlie. I read bodies. You were choosing your words." He looked at her for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, not dramatically different, but different the way a note slightly off-key is different. You need a trained ear to notice, but once you notice, you can never unnotice. "They needed me to come back," he said. "Who?" "I don't have a word for them. There is no word for them." Rachel slowly sat in the chair across from him. "Try." He talked for 2 hours. There was a place. Not beneath the forest, not above it. Somewhere that had no simple geometric relationship to the space they knew. He had arrived there without knowing how, the same way you don't know the exact moment you fall asleep. The place was the structure from the floor plan. Circular. 7 chambers. Made of something that felt like solidified light. Not opaque, not transparent, but something in the interval between the two. There were others there. Not many. 7 in total. 6 were human, from different eras, different places. A woman he identified as being from the 19th century by the way she dressed and the words she used. A man who spoke no language he recognized. A child of maybe 12 who sat in the corner with a completely serene expression that was more disturbing than any look of fear would have been. And there was a 7th entity that was not human. That had never been human. That used human forms the way you wear clothes, for convenience, for communication, without it saying anything about what lay beneath. They were studying, said Charlie. Studying what? Us. A pause. The way we work. The way time passes for us. The way memory functions. The way we... He looked at his hands. The way we love. Charlie, I know how it sounds. How did you come back? He took a moment. They let me come back. When they were finished. Finished with what? He didn't answer immediately. And in that pause Rachel felt the cold of the New York night as if the walls had disappeared. What did they do to you, Charlie? Nothing I can explain with the words we have. He looked at her with those brown eyes she had known for 12 years. But I need you to understand one thing. What? They're going to want one from each group. The silence lasted 3 seconds. What do you mean? From the group of 7. Our hiking group. He lowered his eyes to the floor plan. They already had me. But the structure has 7 chambers, Rachel. And they are methodical. Rachel looked at the drawing. 7 chambers radiating from a center. You're telling me the other 6? Not yet, but eventually. Why are you telling me this? He looked up, and Rachel Voss, who had spent 15 years learning to read bodies, who had studied the human heart until she could hear in an electrocardiogram the difference between a heart that lies and a heart that tells the truth, looked into Charlie Novak's eyes and felt something close inside her chest like a door. Because what she saw was not guilt, not fear. It was something that took a moment to identify and that, once identified, could not be unidentified. It was loyalty, but not to her. Charlie, she said slowly, why are you telling me this? He opened his mouth, and her phone buzzed.
4:23 a.m.
It was a text from Marcus. Rachel, just woke up for no reason. Looked out the window and thought I saw something in the street. Probably nothing. But I remembered I'd been meaning to ask you something since Charlie came back. Does he still wear his watch? Because when he disappeared in the forest, Andre told us to pay attention if our watches stopped. And I never told you this, but mine did. For just 2 minutes. From 2:47 to 2:49 p.m. I didn't think it mattered at the time. But now I keep thinking. Rachel looked up from her phone. Charlie was looking at her with a calm, patient expression. Like someone waiting for another person to finish working out a math problem he already has the answer to. She looked at his wrist. Charlie's watch, the Seiko she had given him on their 3rd anniversary, which he never took off, which had been on his wrist when he disappeared, which had been on his wrist when he was found in Floresti, was stopped. The hands read 2:47 p.m. Charlie, she said. Her voice came out steady. Clinical. Who is outside? He didn't answer. But he smiled, and it was his smile, it was exactly the lopsided smile she had loved for 12 years. And that was precisely why it was so absolutely terrifying. Because now she knew the smile was the only thing that had come back from Hoyabachu. The rest was something else. Studying. Waiting. with the patience that only something which does not know time can have. And at 4:23 in the morning in New York, 6 phones buzzed simultaneously. Marcus, Dana, Theo, Carl, Margot, with a message from an unknown number, no text, just an image. A circular floor plan with 7 chambers, and one of them, for the first time, with a name written inside. The name was hers.